Gotcha. The Olivia Morgan Cruise Ship Mystery Prequel by Wendy Neugent. Copyright 2022 by Wendy Neugent. SWH Media, LLC. All rights reserved. No portion of this book may be reproduced in any form without written permission from the publisher or author, except as permitted by U.S. copyright law. Milk splashed onto the counter as Olivia poured it on her bowl of cereal. She slammed the carton down on the counter. She shook her head and sighed. Olivia pulled a couple of paper towels off the roll and wiped up the milk. She carried her bowl over to the kitchen table and slumped down in her chair. The clink of her spoon against the side of the bowl echoed in the hushed house. Olivia's eyes stung as she looked at the empty seat to her left. Her father should be sitting there, reading his morning paper and eating his usual breakfast of 2 fried eggs over medium, 2 slices of toast, and a side of bacon. Her mom made that for him for breakfast every morning for the past 37 years. A tear slid down her cheek. Olivia pressed her eyes closed. Olivia froze and listened. She thought she'd heard a noise coming from upstairs. Her mom lay in her darkened bedroom. The headache that started at the funeral had blossomed into a full-blown migraine by the time the guests had left the house last night. Margaret had locked the door behind them and headed straight for her bedroom. Olivia had offered to make her breakfast this morning, but her mom had just waved her off. Olivia had walked to her mom's bedside to kiss her, but Chi-Chi, her pet chihuahua, growled at her from her place, cuddled in Margaret's arms. She'd bent down and kissed the top of her mom's head anyway. Olivia scooped the last of the cereal into her spoon. Chi-Chi's toenails clicked on the linoleum floor of the hallway as she approached the kitchen. Chi-Chi paused in the doorway as she looked at Olivia. Her tongue peeked out of her mouth. Olivia raised her spoon to her mouth and ate the last of her cereal. Chi-Chi cocked her head and whined. I thought you didn't like me. Olivia shook her head. You want my cereal? Sorry, pup. I just ate the last bite. Olivia showed Chi-Chi her near-empty bowl. Chi-Chi stood on her hind legs and danced in a circle, her front paws held together, her little tail whipped back and forth as she begged. Olivia tilted her head. So is food the secret to making friends? Olivia stood up and put her cereal bowl in the sink. She walked over to the cupboard where her mom kept Chi-Chi's dog food. She found the bag and poured what was left into Chi-Chi's empty bowl. Chi-Chi dove into her dish, her tail wagging back and forth as she ate. Olivia tossed out the empty bag and dug around in the pantry looking for a fresh bag of food. Looks like we're out, Chi-Chi. Any idea if Mom has any more food stashed somewhere? Olivia reached down to pet her. Chi-Chi whipped around and bared her teeth, growling. Oh, for goodness sakes, Olivia shook her head. I thought we were friends. I guess I'm good enough to feed you, but not good enough to pet you? Olivia found a half-empty bag of dog biscuits. She pulled one out and held it up. Sit. Chi-Chi eyeballed the treat, debating if she wanted it enough to sit. She glanced back at her empty bowl, and then up at the treat, and sat. Good girl! Olivia cautiously lowered the treat. Chi-Chi grabbed it out of her hand and carried it to her basket in the corner of the kitchen. She monitored Olivia as she gnawed on her treat. Margaret shuffled into the kitchen. She was wearing the lavender robe and matching slippers Olivia had sent her for Christmas just a few weeks before. Hey. Margaret looked into Chi-Chi's empty dish and sighed. Did you feed Chi-Chi? Yes, Mom, I did. She ate it all up. I finished the last bag of her food in the pantry. Where do you keep the extra bags of dog food? Margaret put down her teacup. Her shoulders sagged. That was the last bag. With everything going on, I haven't bought any in a few weeks. I guess I'll have to get some today. Olivia hugged her mom. Don't worry about it, Mom. I'll go get her food for her. Olivia found a half-empty bag of dog biscuits. She pulled one out and held it up. Sit. Chi-Chi eyeballed the treat, debating if she wanted it enough to sit. She glanced back at her empty bowl, and then up at the treat, and sat. Good girl! Olivia cautiously lowered the treat. Chi-Chi grabbed it out of her hand and carried it to her basket in the corner of the kitchen. She monitored Olivia as she gnawed on her treat. Margaret shuffled into the kitchen. She was wearing the lavender robe and matching slippers Olivia had sent her for Christmas just a few weeks before. Hey. Margaret looked into Chi-Chi's empty dish and sighed. Did you feed Chi-Chi? Yes, Mom, I did. She ate it all up. I finished the last bag of her food in the pantry. Where do you keep the extra bags of dog food? Margaret put down her teacup. Her shoulders sagged. That was the last bag. With everything going on, I haven't bought any in a few weeks. I guess I'll have to get some today. Olivia hugged her mom. Don't worry about it, Mom. I'll go get her food for her. Margaret pulled her robe shut and shivered. Are you sure? Of course. Olivia bent down and kissed her mom on the cheek. Give me a list of things you need, and I'll swing by the grocery store after the pet store. You don't need to do that. I can probably live on leftover casseroles for a month. Mom, casseroles aren't a balanced diet. You need to eat something that doesn't have cream of mushroom soup as the first ingredient. Olivia grabbed her keys off the hook by the garage door. Are you going to be okay while I'm gone? Margaret shrugged. I'll be fine. I have to get used to being alone. You're only going to be home for a couple more days before you are going back to the ship. Olivia put her keys back on the hook and sat down at the table. You know I would stay longer if I could. I know. Peter got the dance captain to fill in for me this week, but... Peter. Margaret swatted in the air as she spit out his name. He wanted to come home with me, Mom. I'm sure he did. We have a contract. It's fine, Doodlebug. Margaret sat up straighter. It just seems like he would want to be with you for the funeral. He did. Olivia looked down at her hands. He just couldn't. When Peter's grandfather died, you both signed off the ship for an entire cruise so you could go to his funeral. Mom, Olivia sighed. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Margaret took a sip of her tea. I'll be fine while you go to the store. You can't stay home forever, right? I'm going to have to get used to being here without him. Tears streamed down Margaret and Olivia's cheeks. Olivia pulled her mom into her arms and held her tight. She felt the tension in her mother's body slowly ease. Margaret let out a sigh. She pulled away from Olivia and reached into the pocket of her robe. Margaret pulled out a tissue and wiped her tears. She looked at the clock on her stove. Oh, goodness, I need to go take my shower and get dressed. What would your father think of me still in my robe at 10 in the morning? Olivia pulled up in front of the pet store. It looked dark inside, but the open sign was lit. She looked at the hours posted next to the front door and opened the door. A bell rang over the door as she pushed it open. Hello, come in, a gruff voice called from the back of the shop. Olivia wandered the store, looking for the dog food aisle. What are you doing? Olivia looked around the store. Looking for dog food? Uh-oh. Uh-oh? Olivia's brow furrowed. Don't you carry dog food? Woof, woof, woof! Olivia followed the sound of the barking to the back of the store. A small parakeet cage was tucked in the dark corner. Inside, a dull green parrot with a yellow head sat on the lone perch in the cage. He backed towards the wall when he saw Olivia. Hey! Olivia cautiously approached the cage. I'm Olivia. What's your name? The green bird froze. Olivia lifted her hand to wave at the bird. The bird screamed and fell off his perch. He landed on the floor of the cage and cowered in the corner, 1 foot up, as if to protect himself for her. Oh no, Olivia stepped back. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm sorry. The papers at the bottom of the bird's cage were filthy. His food dish was empty and bits of food floated in his water dish. Olivia looked around the shop for an employee to help her. Hold on, I'll be right back, okay? The parrot cocked his head. Okay. Oh, Olivia took a step towards the cage. Did you understand what I said? The parrot backed into the corner and made a sound like a baby crying. Olivia backed away. Don't cry. I won't hurt you. I'll be right back. Let me find someone to give you food and fresh water. Olivia headed towards the cash register, but the desk was still empty. She circled the store, but no one was there. She walked through the aisles to the back of the store. There was a door on the back wall. Hello? Is anyone here? Olivia knocked on the door and turned the handle, opening it enough to peek in the back. Piles of stuff lined the walls of the cramped storage room. Hello? A door to the alleyway in back opened. What are you doing back here? A man shouted at her. Olivia took a step back. Sorry, I need to buy dog food. No one was up front to check me out. The man stomped through the storeroom towards Olivia and paused in front of the pile of stuff lining the wall. I'll be out in a minute. Of course. Olivia walked back into the store. She bumped into a display of Chi-Chi's favorite dog food and picked up a bag. Chapter 2. Is that all? He took the bag of dog food from Olivia. Olivia looked into the corner at the parrot huddling on the floor of his way too small cage. Actually, it isn't. What's the story with the parrot? The man made a fist. Stupid bird was supposed to be a talker. The guy I got him off of told me all the stuff he could say, but he hasn't said a word since I got him. Mean sucker, too. He didn't seem mean to me, just scared. Olivia's eyes narrowed. He's out of food, and his water is dirty. The man rolled his eyes. Jerk bird comes at me anytime I go near his cage. Maybe he'll rethink attacking me if he gets hungry enough. Olivia tapped her credit card on the edge of the counter. You can't starve him into being nice to you. That's ridiculous. What business is it of yours anyway? He glared at Olivia. He's not your bird. I'm a customer of your establishment. That makes him my business. The man crossed his arms and glared at Olivia. You're buying dog food, not the bird, so he's not your business. What is your supervisor's name? I own this place. Olivia's heart pounded. She opened up her mouth to say something, thought better of it, and closed it again. How much are you asking for the parrot? The man looked Olivia up and down. His eyes rested on her credit card. Olivia wished she'd worn her cheap parka instead of the dress coat she'd bought to wear to the funeral. 10 grand. What? Olivia took a step away from the register. You have got to be kidding. The owner raised his chin and crossed his arms. He's a very valuable bird. He talks. A lot. Olivia gasped and shook her head. You just said he didn't talk. The man shrugged. Yeah, but he will talk. Talking parrots are worth a lot. Olivia frowned and shook her head. Well, I don't have $10,000. 8? Olivia's eyes darted to the bird. She shook her head. Please, he needs food and clean water. Sure, I'll get right on that. For now, I just need this. Olivia shoved the bag of dog food across the counter. He rang her up. Olivia's chin trembled as she glanced at the green bird in the dark corner of the store. Margaret shuffled through the stack of mail. She pulled out an envelope and handed it to Olivia. You got something in the mail. Olivia opened the envelope and skimmed the letter. She put it down on the kitchen table and laid her head down on her arms. Are you okay, dear? It's from Dad's insurance company. It says he had a life insurance policy and that I'm the beneficiary. Olivia picked up the letter and handed it to her mom. Margaret put on her reading glasses. Oh, yes, I knew about that. He had one policy for you, one for Brian, and one for me. He wanted to be sure we were all taken care of if he wasn't here to do it himself. Olivia rubbed her forehead and covered her eyes with her hand. Baby, are you all right? Yes, Mom. I just miss him so much. Me too, sweetheart. Margaret put the kettle on and made them each a cup of hot tea. I'll feel better knowing you have a little nest egg in case you need it. It makes me nervous that you're out there on your own, traveling all over the place. I'm not on my own, Mom. I'm with Peter. Margaret rolled her eyes. Anyway, I know it isn't a lot, but I'm glad you have something if you need it. An odd wheezing noise came from Margaret's stomach. Hungry, Mom? Margaret lowered her glasses. Why do you ask, dear? Isn't that your stomach growling? Margaret giggled and lifted the edge of her sweater, revealing a sleeping Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi whined, and Margaret pulled her sweater back down over her. She gets cold. She likes to be tucked in close to me to stay toasty. Chi-Chi popped her head out from under Margaret's sweater. Her tongue hung out of her mouth, and she wobbled back and forth. Is Mommy's little baby awake? Margaret picked her up and kissed her on her forehead. Chi-Chi's tail wagged so hard her bottom rocked back and forth. She stretched up on her hind legs and licked Margaret's chin. Margaret kissed her again. Are you hungry? Margaret carried Chi-Chi over to the pantry cupboard and pulled out the bag of dog food. Thank you for getting her food this morning. Of course, happy to do it. Olivia paused. I went to that pet store off Edgar Ave. Have you been there? Margaret thought for a moment. No, I don't think so. I usually buy her food from the vet, but they're closed on weekends. It's good to know that the pet store carries her brand of food. I have a hard time finding dog food that didn't bother her tummy. Margaret put Chi-Chi down on the floor and poured food into her dish. Chi-Chi dug into her meal. You're probably better off getting her food at the vet's office. The pet store is a weird place. Weird? What do you mean? Well, when I went to the store, no one was out front. I had to go looking for the clerk to check me out. Probably just on a break. It was more than that. There was this poor parrot there, no food in his dish, and dirty water. Olivia exhaled forcefully. I can't stop thinking about the poor little guy. I tried to get the man to change his water and give him food, but the jerk told me it wasn't any of my business. Then he tried to sell me the bird for an exorbitant amount of money. Oh, goodness, last thing you need is a bird. What do you mean by that? How are you going to have a pet with all the traveling you do? Margaret picked Chi-Chi up and kissed her. Chi-Chi shivered, and Margaret tucked her back under her sweater. Well, the parrot talks. I could put him in the magic show, bring him on ships. You're not going to be working on ships forever, dear. Why don't you wait until you get off and get a normal pet? You could get a little chihuahua like Chi-Chi and they could play together. I don't want a chihuahua, Mom. Why not? What's wrong with Chi-Chi? Apart from the fact that she tries to bite my nose off anytime I come near her? Margaret waved that off. She just doesn't know you very well, dear. You're gone most of the time. Margaret unbuttoned the top couple of buttons on her sweater. Chi-Chi popped her head out. She's adorable, Mom, and I'm glad you have her. Olivia reached over to pet Chi-Chi. She bared her teeth and growled at Olivia. Olivia pulled her hand back as the dog lunged at her. Stop that, Chi-Chi. Margaret tucked her back inside her sweater. I told you to stop threatening people when they try to pet you. You'll never have any friends if you keep doing this. Olivia sighed. Besides, Mom, I don't have any plans to get off of ships. This is Peter's career. It's not like there are a lot of good-paying gigs for magic acts. Cruise ships pay really well. A lot better than birthday parties, that's for sure. Magic isn't a career. I mean, this is a fun thing for you to do while you're young, but you can't have a family working on cruise ships. Mom, this is what Peter wants to do, and I'm lucky that he wants me with him. I think Peter is lucky that you're willing to live like a hobo with no home of your own. Chapter 3. Olivia pulled her key out of the ignition. The pet store parking lot was just as empty as it had been yesterday. She wondered how the store could afford to stay in business if they never had any customers. Olivia shivered as the warmth in the car quickly dissipated. She talked to Peter this morning when he docked in St. Thomas. He told her it was sunny and beautiful, a far cry from the bitter cold and snow here. She'd mentioned the little green parrot, hoping he'd tell her to rescue the bird and that they could add him to their act. Olivia had tried to convince him that the bird would make an excellent addition to their show. She could train the parrot to talk and sing. She even suggested a couple of magic tricks they could put him in. Instead of being excited about the idea, he told her it would be too complicated and expensive to travel with a parrot. He told her it was a stupid idea. Olivia hadn't realized how much she wanted the bird until Peter had told her no. Peter had said that if she still wanted a parrot in the future, They should look at something flashy like a macaw. He thought that would be much more impressive than a plain green parrot. She took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. The fog of her breath swirled in front of her face as she shivered. If she couldn't adopt the bird, the least she could do was make sure he had food and clean water. Olivia opened the car door and swung her snow boots out onto the ice-covered parking lot. She slipped and slid her way to the front door of the shop and cautiously opened it. A teenage boy sat slumped behind the register. He glanced up at her, grunted a welcome, and immediately went back to whatever video game he was playing. Olivia walked down the dog food aisle and headed towards the back corner. The parrot stood on his perch on one foot, his cheek feathers fluffed out. He jumped when he heard her approach and scooted down his perch. Hey yourself, birdie. He rocked back and forth, and then stood on one foot and stretched his wing out, revealing red feathers with blue tips. Olivia gasped. I don't know why Peter thinks a macaw is prettier than you. My guess is, if we got you on a better diet, your feathers would be even more beautiful than they are now. He bobbed his yellow head up and down and walked over to the bars of his cage. He leaned against them and rubbed up and down, ruffling his feathers. May I pet you? Olivia raised her finger and rubbed his cheek through the bars of the cage. The bird made a purring sound like a cat. Are you a kitty or a parrot? Meow. He laughed at his own joke and then leaned back against the cage for her to pet his cheek again. His eyes closed as she rubbed his cheek feathers. Olivia stood next to his cage, petting him until he backed away. He shook out his tail feathers. The ends were jagged and broken from being in such a small cage. He leaned down to his food dish and picked up a seed. He had a few seeds left at the bottom of his dish. At least the owner had given him some food after she'd left yesterday. Poor birdie, are you hungry? The parrot danced back and forth. His water dish had seed hulls floating in it. He dipped his beak in his water, raised his head, and drank down the water he'd scooped up. Olivia walked up to the register. The teenager pulled his headphones off one ear. Yeah? The parrot in the back. Olivia pointed to the back corner of the store. Yeah, what about him? His water dish is dirty. The boy nodded and put his headphones back on. Olivia tilted her head down and waved her hand to get his attention. The boy took his headphones off. What? He needs fresh water. The boy shrugged. He's a biter. I'm not going in that cage. Olivia sighed. Well, what if I clean his dishes and get him fresh water? Whatever, but if you get bit, it's all on you. He put his headphones back on and looked down at his video game. Olivia marched back to the parrot's cage. Well, buddy, it looks like it's up to me. She put her hand on the door of his cage and held her breath. She unlatched the door and slowly opened it. What are you doing? He squeaked and jumped off his perch. You're not going to bite me, right? Olivia exhaled. I will not hurt you. I'm trying to get you clean water. The parrot tilted his yellow head and watched as she cautiously reached into his cage and lifted his dish. Olivia looked around the store. She didn't see a sink. She walked back to the register. The teenager rolled his eyes. Yeah? Do you have a sink where I can rinse out his dish? He nodded his head to the door in the back wall of the shop and went back to his game. Olivia turned the handle and opened the door a few inches. There was a door open in the back corner revealing a toilet. Olivia scooted past the sheet-covered pile of stuff she'd seen the day before and walked into the dingy bathroom. She dumped the water out of the dish and grabbed a paper towel. She scrubbed out the interior of the dish as best as she could using the sliver of dried-out soap, rinsed it, and filled it with water from the tap. As she slid past the piles of stuff, the skirt of her coat caught one of the drop cloths and pulled it off the pile. She reached down, picked it up, and went to cover the pile back up. Instead of boxes of pet food or new animal cages, the sheet had been covering an oil painting of a beautiful woman in a long dress sitting at a table in front of a window. The painting was in a thick wooden frame. Olivia ran her finger over the surface of the painting and felt brush marks. Olivia lifted the edge of another drop cloth. The carved leg of a table shimmered with gold leaf, and the tabletop had intricate wood inlay. It reminded her of a table she'd seen on a tour she'd taken of a mansion in Newport when she and Peter had been doing a New England fall foliage run. She covered the painting with a drop cloth and looked around the dingy storeroom. Not the type of thing you'd expect to see in the back of a junky little pet store like this. The door opened, and Olivia jumped, spilling a little of the water out of the parrot's bowl. "Oh, you scared me." "Sorry, I gotta use the John. You done in there?" "Oh, yes, of course." Olivia walked back into the pet store and put the dish in the parrot's cage. She found a bag of parrot food, ripped it open, and filled the parrot's dish. What are you doing?" Olivia laughed. "Feeding you, silly bird. Do you like this?" Mmm. He tucked into the food in his dish. He pulled out an almond with his beak and held it with his foot while he broke open the shell. "Treat!" "So, you're a pretty good talker, aren't you?" He dropped the shell to the bottom of his cage and set to work on the almond. Mmm, snack. "At least you have food and clean water." Olivia closed the door on his cage and took a step back. She sighed. "Today. You have it today. But what about tomorrow?" Chapter 4. The bank teller handed Olivia an envelope. "Is there anything else I can help you with? I'd be happy to open an account for you if you want to deposit your cash." Olivia tucked the envelope into her coat pocket. "Not today, thank you, but I might come back in a couple of days and open an account then. I haven't decided." "We'll be here." "I travel a lot. Do you have a list of branches? Can I make a withdrawal internationally?" Olivia shoved her hands in her coat pockets. "Sorry for all the questions." "No problem at all. That's what I'm here for." The teller went over the options with Olivia. "Thanks." Olivia waved and headed out to her car. She turned the key in the ignition and sat for a second until the car warmed up a bit. Olivia reached into her pocket and pulled out the envelope. She peeled back the sticky flap and pulled out the cash. Olivia hit the lock button on her car door. She'd never held this much cash in her hands before. She and Peter got paid in cash once a week on the cruise ship. The crew purser counted out their paycheck and tucked the money in an envelope similar to this one. Peter would peel off a couple of bills and hand them to her for the week. Then he took the rest to deposit when they got back to a U.S. port. On the ship, they used their ID card to pay for drinks and anything else they needed, so the money he gave her was more than enough. Peter had called her from St. Bart's this morning. He and a few of the other entertainers were on their way to the beach. She told him about the money her dad had left her. Peter thought they should invest it in the show so they could get better gigs. He'd suggested that they should buy a new illusion. He wanted something unique that might help them get a show in Las Vegas one day. Olivia told him that her dad had left the money to her because he wanted her to have some savings. Before they could discuss it further, someone had called Peter, and he'd rushed to get off the phone. Olivia wished she hadn't told him about the money. But then she felt bad that she thought about keeping it from him. She didn't like keeping secrets. She put the money back in the envelope and pressed the flap shut. She tucked it in her coat pocket and put the car in reverse. She put the car in park and pulled out the envelope. She counted out $1,000 in hundreds and put it in her wallet. She put the envelope in her glove box and locked it. She pulled out of the parking lot and turned left onto Edgar. She slowed as she passed the pet store. The light turned red, and she pulled to a stop in front of the pet store's parking lot. "I don't need a bird." Olivia pounded the steering wheel. "I don't need a parrot." She looked to the left out of her window, so she wasn't looking at the pet store. The eyes of the passenger in the car next to hers darted away, and they turned towards the driver and said something. They both laughed. The driver leaned forward and looked at Olivia. She sighed and looked out the other window. There was a truck parked in front of the pet store. She wondered if someone was there to buy the little parrot. The car behind her honked, and she jerked back. Her foot came off the gas, and the car lurched forward. Olivia threw on her turn signal and pulled into the parking lot of the pet store. She threw the car in park. Olivia shrugged. "I'll just make sure he has food and clean water." She opened the car door. Screams echoed across the parking lot. She slammed the car door shut behind her and ran toward the pet store. The screeching got louder and louder as she approached. She threw open the door and ran into the shop. "Shut up, you stupid bird!" The pet store owner hit the side of the parrot's cage. The parrot cowered in the corner of his cage, yelling. He hit the cage again. "I said shut up!" "Stop hitting his cage!" Olivia raced across the store. "Leave him alone!" The parrot lunged at him, his beak open, threatening the man. He rocked back and forth, his wings lifted from the side of his body, showing little spots of red feathers on the top of his wings. The man banged against the cage with his knuckles. The parrot hissed and lurched towards him. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" He backed away. "The stupid bird has been screaming since I got back yesterday." He turned and glared at the parrot. "There must be something wrong. He's yelling because he's upset and trying to tell you something." "Whatever, lady." He crossed his arms. "You need more dog food or something?" The parrot started yelling again. Olivia winced and covered her ears. The man lifted his fist like he was going to hit the cage. Olivia took a step towards him. He looked at Olivia, lowered his fist, and backed away. The bell over the pet store door jingled. "Hey, I got another..." The man caught sight of Olivia. "Load." The owner's eyes darted towards the man. "Yeah, I'll be with you in a minute." "Bye, bye." The parrot's orange eyes flared and the feathers on his neck fluffed up. "Goodbye." The store owner looked at Olivia. "I'll be right back." Olivia smiled. "Take your time." The owner followed the man into the storeroom. A hush fell over the shop. The parrot climbed up the side of his cage and back onto his perch. He leaned against the bars of his cage. Olivia reached up and rubbed his feathery cheek. "Causing some trouble, are you?" He purred like a cat. "Hey. Hey yourself." The parrot cocked his yellow head. What are you doing?" "I don't know. I wish I did." The owner and the man walked out of the stockroom. "That's everything." The owner's eyes darted towards Olivia. "Good." He walked ahead, pushed open the door, and followed the man outside. Olivia could hear muffled voices but couldn't make out what they were saying. The owner walked back into the shop. The parrot screamed, "Ah! Ah! Ah!" The man froze and took a deep breath. Olivia put her fingers in her ears. The owner threw his hands up and walked over to the register. Olivia reached into her pocket, pulled out her wallet, and peeled off 5 bills. She stuck her wallet in her coat pocket. Olivia walked over to the register. She raised her voice over the parrot's screams. "I'll give you $500 for the parrot." "You know he's a very valuable bird, right?" The man shouted over the parrot shrieking. "Birds that talk are worth a lot." Olivia cocked her head and cupped her ear with her hand. "Sorry, I couldn't hear you." The owner slouched on a stool. $600. Olivia pulled out the cash and held it up. $500. Cash. He looked at the money. The parrot shrieked louder. The man whipped the cash out of her hand. "Fine. Good luck to you." Olivia walked over to the bird cage and exhaled. The parrot quieted. "Bye-bye?" No goodbye." Olivia reached down and picked up the small cage. "Hello." Chapter 5. Olivia pulled her passenger door open and put the cage on her front seat. The parrot fluffed up his feathers and shook. "I'm sorry. I know it's cold out here, buddy." Olivia slipped off her coat and wrapped it around the cage. She reached up and pulled out the seatbelt. She stretched it around the cage and clicked it into the buckle. Olivia shut the door, scooted around the car into the driver's seat. She looked over at the bundled cage in her passenger seat. Her cheeks filled with air and she exhaled. "For goodness sakes, what have I done?" A little parrot eye peeked at her from under the edge of her coat. "Hey." "Hey." Olivia sighed and put the key in the ignition. The car roared to life. She cranked up the heater. "Ready to go home?" Olivia didn't have a home, and she didn't know if she could even take him on the ship with her. At least he was out of that awful pet store. "Snack?" "When we get home," Her head dropped. She hadn't bought any parrot food. She looked at the pet store. Nope, I'm not going back in there. We'll figure something else out. Olivia pulled out of the parking lot and headed to her mother's house. Mom, I realize it isn't ideal. I'm sorry I didn't ask you first. Olivia shifted on her twin-sized childhood bed. But I didn't plan to get him. I just couldn't leave him there. Margaret leaned against Olivia's bedroom door. Chi-Chi has been through so much with losing Daddy and all the company in her house. It doesn't feel fair to her to bring a bird in. Mom, Olivia closed her eyes and exhaled. It's just for a few days while I'll make arrangements to rejoin the ship. I'll keep him in my bedroom, okay? Birds are so messy. Remember when Aunt Agnes had those parakeets? There was always seed all over her floors. I'll put down newspapers and I'll clean up after him. Olivia stood up. Like I said, it's just for a few days. I just couldn't leave him there. The owner was horrible to him. Sounds awful. Poor thing doesn't deserve that kind of treatment. It just seems like a lot for you to adopt a bird with all the traveling you do. What does Peter think? I haven't told him yet. Hopefully, he'll call me when he gets into port. Maybe you can find a home for the bird. Margaret looked at the parrot. You did the right thing getting him out of that unpleasant situation, I guess, but that doesn't mean you have to keep him. Chi-Chi's toenails clicked down the hallway. Margaret turned around, leaned down, and picked her up. How's Mama's baby? Did you have a good nap? Chi-Chi's tail wagged back and forth. She folded her ears back as Margaret kissed the top of her head. Rat! The parrot screeched. He climbed the bars of his cage and rocked back and forth. Ah! Ah! Oh no! Rat! Rat? Margaret's eyes opened like saucers. Is that parrot calling my Chi-Chi a rat? Olivia leapt up and threw her coat over the parrot's cage. No, Mom, I'm sure that's not what he was saying. He probably meant rats. You know, like Bummer. Olivia sighed. Rats, I'm in this cage. Margaret kissed the dog's head again. Well, I'm sure Chi-Chi's hungry after her nap, so I'd better go give her dinner. Sounds good, Mom. I'm going to get him settled, and then I'll come down and make you dinner. You don't have to cook. I'll heat one of the casseroles. Olivia was pretty sure she'd be happy if she never had another bite of casserole again. Sure, Mom. That sounds great. Margaret pulled the door shut behind her. Olivia took her coat off of the cage. There was a hole in the lining. Did you chew a hole in my coat? The parrot looked away. Olivia rubbed her face with her hands. What have I done? Rats. Chi-Chi isn't a rat. She's a dog. Woof? He questioned. Yes, woof. Chi-Chi? Chi-Chi is a chihuahua. She's a dog. Chi-Chi? Yes, Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi. He rocked back and forth on his perch. Chi-Chi. Chico. Chi-Chi. Chico. Chico, huh? The parrot bobbed his head up and down. Chico, 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 Chico. Chico? Chico. Does Chico want something to eat? Snack. Olivia opened the plastic bag of carrots she'd gotten from her mom's fridge and pulled out a baby carrot. She opened up the cage door and held the carrot up to Chico. He whined and leaned away from her. Are you afraid of a carrot? Olivia wiggled it in front of him. Chico jumped off of his perch and backed into the corner of his cage. I won't hurt you. Are you a green chicken? Cluck. Olivia laughed. Haven't you ever had a carrot before? She took another carrot out of the bag and took a bite of it. Good. She held the carrot out to Chico. Try it. Chico slowly waddled towards Olivia. He cautiously reached up and took the carrot out of her hand. He held it in his foot and lifted it up to his beak. Chico ran his tongue up and down the carrot. He took a bite. Snack. Yes, snack. Olivia shut the cage and sat back down on her bed. She picked up her Aunt Agnes's book on parakeets that she'd found down in the basement. I know you aren't a parakeet, but this will have to do until I can find a book on Amazon parrots. Chico had finished his carrot. Little bits of carrot clung to his beak. The carrot had colored his light-colored beak orange. You look like you have orange lipstick on, goofy boy. Treat? In a minute. I think the next thing on our list is giving you a bath. I didn't want to mention it, but you smell a little funny. She flipped a page. Should we try one in the sink? Olivia looked at his cage. Her heart fluttered, thinking about reaching in and picking him up. Or maybe a mister bottle. The book said that's an option some birds like. She rummaged under her bathroom counter and came up with an empty spray bottle she'd used to wet her hair in the mornings before school if she'd overslept and didn't have time to wash it. She filled it with water and screwed the lid on. Olivia walked over to Chico's cage and pumped the handle. A mist of water settled over Chico. He ducked down and shrieked at the droplets. Olivia squirted it again. Chico spread out his wings and slowly rocked back and forth. Do you like it? Olivia squirted the spray bottle again. You're a tropical bird, right? So this is like a tropical rain shower. Chico climbed out of his cage and up the side of it. He stood on top of the cage and danced back and forth. Zip-a-dee! I think you like it. Olivia sprayed him until the bottle was empty. Chico shook himself off. His yellow head feathers splayed out in yellow spikes around his head. Olivia giggled. You look like you're wearing a little kid's drawing of a sun on your head. She put the spray bottle down and picked up the book. Chico stood on one foot on top of his cage. His eyes drooped close. He muttered to himself, all right, okay, you got your goods? Okay, bye. Olivia put the book down on her lap. What did you say? Chico was sound asleep. Chapter 6. I need to take him to a vet, get a travel carrier, a new cage, and arrange for his travel papers to join the ship. Olivia took a breath. Are you really okay with me staying with Mom for an extra week? Olivia gripped her phone tightly. Really? She exhaled. Thank you, Peter. I was worried you'd be upset with me. Olivia hung up the phone and fell back on her bed. Well, Chico, that went way better than I feared. Olivia grabbed a pad of paper out of her nightstand drawer and made a list of all the things she needed to do before she flew back to the ship with Chico. She read it aloud to Chico. Can you think of anything I'm missing? Snack. Olivia shrugged. I don't think I need to put that on the list. I am sure you will remind me. She walked over to Chico's cage and stood there looking at him. Well, I guess we might as well start your training now if you're going to earn your keep on the ship. Olivia opened up a bag of unsalted sunflower seeds she'd found in her mom's pantry and held one up. She held her hand in front of Chico. Step up. Chico backed up and made a noise like a crying baby. Nope, you have to earn your treat. She waved the seed in front of him. Up. Chico raised a foot and gently put it on her hand. Good boy. Olivia gave him the seed. Not quite stepping up, but you've got the idea. Chico wolfed down the seed. Treat. Do you want another one? Chico held his foot in the air. Okay, but step onto my hand. Olivia held up another seed. Up. Chico put his foot on her hand. She backed her hand away a bit. Chico wobbled and gripped her hand. She lifted him up. Good boy, Olivia grinned. I'm so proud of you. I'm a good boy, a good boy. Chico took the seed. Yes, you are. Olivia wrinkled her nose. I think we need to change the papers in your cage. Down. She set Chico down on top of his cage, grabbed a stack of newspapers and a trash bag. She threw them out. She grabbed a section of the newspaper. Here is some new reading material for you. She read the headline on the front page to Chico. Historic mansion burgled. Thief made off with $250,000 in antiques. Continued on B1. Wow, those are some pretty valuable antiques. She tucked the newspaper in the tray and picked up another section of the newspaper. Above the fold was a photo of a man standing in front of a fireplace. Above the fireplace hung a painting of a woman in a long dress sitting at a table. Olivia gasped. She turned the newspaper toward Chico. Did you see a painting that looked a lot like this at the pet store? Chico mumbled something. Olivia squinted. What did you say? Pigeon? The doorbell rang downstairs. Chico rocked back and forth on top of his cage. Hello, who is it? Come in. I'll answer the door, but thanks for your help. Olivia picked Chico up off the top of his cage and held him in front of his perch. Down. Chico stepped onto his perch. Good boy. Olivia ran downstairs. She pulled open the front door. Uncle Mike! Sorry I haven't been by since the funeral. Mike took off his navy cap, shook the snow off of it, and walked into the foyer. He hugged Olivia and kissed the top of her head. I've been working double shifts. No need to apologize, but I'm glad you came by. Olivia took his coat and hung it on the hook by the door. She led him into the kitchen. Tea? That would be lovely, Liv. Mike sunk down into a kitchen chair. His heavy belt clattered against the chair. He leaned forward, pulled his radio off, and laid it on the table. I know you're heading out to the ship in a couple days, and I wanted to see you before you leave. Olivia filled the kettle up. Actually, I'm not going back until next Saturday. Mike jerked to attention. Something wrong with Margaret? No, Olivia shook her head. Mom's upset, of course, but she's doing as well as can be expected. She's actually over at her friend Gladys's playing cards. She didn't want to go, but I told her she should. When I'm not here, she can't stay home alone all the time. Very true. She's going to need to get out, not just stay cooped up in the house. Mike took the mug from Olivia and breathed in the steam. First time all day I've felt warm. So if Maggie's doing okay, why are you staying longer? Hello, who is it? Chico squawked from upstairs. Come in. Mike pushed back his chair and rose from his seat. Who the heck is that? That's Chico. He's the reason I'm staying longer. Something happened with you and Pete? No, Peter and I are fine. Olivia shook her head and laughed. Chico is a parrot. A parrot? Mike sat back down in the kitchen chair. Why is there a parrot upstairs? There was a flapping sound and then a thunk at the bottom of the stair. Hello? Who is it? Chico waddled down the hallway towards the kitchen. Apparently, he isn't upstairs. Olivia stood up and walked down the hall and held her hand up in front of Chico. Chico stepped on her hand. Good boy! How did you get out of your cage? Did I forget to close the door? Olivia walked to the kitchen. Chico perched on her hand. Chico decided to go on a little adventure, apparently. Chico caught sight of Olivia's uncle and shrieked, Run! Hop! Run! Run! He flapped off her hand and crashed onto the floor. Chico, this is my Uncle Mike. Olivia reached down and picked Chico up. He's a good guy. You'll like him. Chico glared at Mike. He leaned back on Olivia's hand. Olivia pulled out a kitchen stool and held Chico in front of it. Here, you can perch on this stool. Up! Chico climbed onto the back of the stool. Not a pigeon. Yes, Chico, we know you're not a pigeon. You're a parrot. Mike leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. What are you going to do with that thing? I'm going to train him to be in the show. Olivia shrugged. I sort of lucked into adopting Chico the other day. Olivia poured them each a cup of tea and brought out a package of cookies. Treat! No cookies for you, Chico, but I'll get you a carrot. Olivia closed the refrigerator. Hold on a second. I need to go get some papers to put down under the stool so he doesn't make a mess on the floor. Olivia ran upstairs, snatched up a pile of newspaper, and ran back downstairs. Mike and Chico sat at opposite ends of the kitchen, glaring at each other. Pretty sure that bird doesn't like me. He just doesn't know you yet, Uncle Mike. Mike lifted one eyebrow and grunted. Olivia crouched down and unfolded a section of newspaper to put under Chico's stool. She shook her head and sighed. Olivia folded it back up and put it on the table. She pulled out the entertainment section and laid it down on the floor under the stool. She handed Chico a carrot. She put the cookies on a dish and placed it on the kitchen table. Mike reached for a cookie, exposing his holster. Ah! Ah! Chico fluttered off of his perch and landed on the floor. Gun! It's okay. Olivia scooped him up and held him to her chest. Uncle Mike is a good guy. He won't hurt you. The door to the garage opened. Margaret kicked the snow off her boots and stepped into the kitchen. Chi-Chi's head popped out of her mother's coat. Back from Gladys's. You were right, Olivia. It was a good idea to go play cards. Margaret caught sight of her brother, and her face lit up. Michael! Mike stood up. Chi-Chi bared her teeth and growled at Mike. Mike kissed Margaret on the cheek. Chi-Chi lunged at Mike, growling. Mike backed up and put his hands in the air. She's my sister, you dratted beast. Rat! Chico squawked. Mike chortled and wagged a finger at Chico. Good one, Bird. Margaret slapped Mike's arm. Oh, Margaret, just teasing. He winked at Chico. We know Chi-Chi's a dog, don't we, Bird? Dog? Chico laughed. Ha ha ha. He turned his head and examined Chi-Chi. Woof? Chapter 7. Olivia helped her mom off with her coat and hung it on the hook by the door. She boiled another kettle of water. Here you go, Mom. That'll warm you up. As Olivia lifted the kettle across the table, water dripped onto the section of newspaper she put on the table. Darn it! Olivia put the kettle on the stove and blotted the newspaper with a napkin. Something important in the local section, Liv? Olivia sighed and sank down in her chair. Uncle Mike, I have a question for you. Do you know anything about the antiques that were stolen from the McLeod mansion? Mike peered over the top of his mug at Olivia. He took a sip and put his mug down on the table. Why do you ask? I saw a story about it in the newspaper. I was wondering if you knew anything about it. Mike shook his head. Liv, you know I don't talk about work. Work? Olivia leaned in. So you're working on the case? Mike frowned. I didn't say that. No, not exactly. Olivia Grace, Mike said he didn't want to talk about it. Margaret picked up the tray of cookies and held it up to Mike. Cookie? Mike waved her away, leaned back in his chair, and crossed his arms. What do you want to know about the McLeod case? Olivia opened the newspaper and pointed at the picture of the painting. I think I saw that painting and some antiques in the back storeroom of the pet shop where I got Chico. Which pet store is that? The one on Edgar. That dump? Mike snorted. The owner of that place can't even afford to plow his parking lot. I doubt he's got anything of any value. Maybe some junk he got at a thrift store? No, this wasn't thrift store furniture. I only saw a corner of one piece, but it was really beautiful. Olivia shook her head and jabbed her finger at the picture of the painting. And that painting is really familiar. I think it was the same one I saw in the storeroom. Apparently, it's a pretty famous painting. The owner told me who painted it, but I can't remember his name now. Olivia sat straight up in her chair. So you are on that case. Mike slouched. Look, it really doesn't matter if I am or if I'm not. Maybe you saw a similar painting, or maybe it was a print of the original. No matter what, it isn't anything you need to worry about. But Uncle Mike, Olivia, Margaret cut her off. Michael is here to visit us. Let's not badger our guest. Yes, Mom. Olivia held Chico to her chest and scratched the back of his neck. He leaned against her. He lifted his wing away from his body, and Olivia pet his feathers on his side. Who knew you were going to be such a cuddle bug? Bug? Chico pulled away from Olivia. No, not that kind of bug. Olivia shook her head. I never spent time with a parrot before. I didn't know parrots like to be pet. Chico's beak opened wide and his little dark tongue pushed out as he yawned. Oh, big yawn. Is my little birdie boy tired? Olivia put him in his cage. You need a nap? Chico tucked one foot up into his breast feathers. He made little sounds and muttered to himself as he settled down. Olivia leaned down to try to understand what he was whispering. Good boy. I'm a very good boy. Good boy. Chico whispered, his eyes drooped close. Uh-oh, gun under the register. Boy, uh-oh. Wait, what did you say? Chico opened his eyes and glared at her. Be a good boy. I am a good boy, Olivia sputtered. I'm a good girl. What did you say about a gun? Chico shook out his feathers, closed his eyes, and ignored her. Olivia pulled out of the bank parking lot and turned left on Edgar. She'd kept out some cash to pay for Chico's new cage and vet bills, but the rest of her inheritance was safely deposited in the bank. She hoped her debit card arrived in the mail before she had to fly back to the ship. Her mom would forward it to her like she did with all of Olivia's important mail, but she worried it would get lost in the mail. Olivia slowed as she passed the pet store. The parking lot was empty again. Chico needs some food. Olivia put on her signal and turned into the parking lot. Olivia put the car in park and took a breath. Her fingernails tapped on the steering wheel. And I should get a bag of Chi-Chi's food so Mom doesn't have to worry about it for a while. The bell over the door jingled as she walked into the pet shop. No one was at the register. The shop was empty. Olivia picked up a bag of parrot food and another of Chi-Chi's dog food. She wandered the store for a couple of minutes, but no one came to check her out. She put the bags down on the counter and walked to the back of the store. She knocked on the storeroom door with her knuckles. No one answered. She turned the handle on the door and cracked it open a couple of inches. Anyone back here? Silence. Olivia's eyes darted around the room. The pile of stuff under the sheets had grown. Hello? She took a step into the storeroom. Hello? She leaned down and lifted the edge of the drop cloth covering the painting. I knew it. Knew what? The store owner stood in the bathroom's doorway. He rubbed his hands on his pants. Olivia dropped the cloth and staggered backwards. Oh, there you are. I knew you had to be back here somewhere. She took another step back. I have dog food and parrot food. I need you to ring me up. She grabbed the door handle and turned it. The owner stared into her eyes and took a step towards her. Really? Olivia's eyes widened. Really? I put the bag on the counter before I came looking for you. Looking for me, were you? He leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. Did you think I was under that drop cloth? Olivia pushed the door to the store open with her foot. She scratched her head. Oh, well, you see, I think you've seen enough. He reached behind his back and pulled a small pistol from his waistband. Look, I didn't see anything, Olivia gulped. I assure you. He lurched forward. Olivia spun and ran. She slammed the door behind her just as he reached it. She ran down the aisle and dodged behind a display of dog food. He threw the door open. You think you're pretty clever, don't you? Olivia held her breath, hoping he wouldn't hear her heart pounding. I know this store like the back of my hand. He paced along the back of the store, looking down each aisle. It's just a matter of time before I find you. Olivia peeked around the cardboard display. He was standing at the end of the aisle, his gun pointed at her. Olivia shoved the display at him and raced down the aisle toward the cash register. Olivia dove behind the counter. You blighter! He kicked a bag of dog food. Come out! I'll end it for you quickly. Otherwise, I'll make it hard on you. She heard him kick another bag and walk down the aisle toward her. Olivia looked up at the phone on the wall above her head. If she stood up to reach it, he'd shoot her before she could dial. She reached under the counter and felt around for something she could throw at him and distract him. Her hand brushed up against cold steel. She grabbed it and pulled it out from under the counter. A stapler. Olivia sighed. It was going to have to do. She flung the stapler over the counter and across the store. She hoped it would distract him. The stapler clanged as it struck a metal shelf of hamster cages. The man's footsteps stopped. Olivia reached under the cash register. Her hand slid along a stack of new plastic shopping bags. She reached deeper and grabbed it. Her hand shook as she pulled out the gun. She took a deep breath. All right, girl, where are you? Olivia jumped up and pointed the gun at the man. I'm right here, and it appears that my gun is bigger than yours. But I know how to use mine. He took a step toward her. A girl like you doesn't know how to handle such a big weapon. Olivia looked at him through the sight. Put the gun down, girl. Olivia cocked the gun. I'm actually an excellent shot. My uncle taught me. Wanted to make sure I could protect myself. She aimed at a bag of cat litter on a shelf behind him and shot it. The cat litter erupted from the bag and rained down on the floor. I'm not afraid to use it. She cocked the gun again. You're frickin' crazy. Olivia barked out a laugh. The man lurched toward her. Olivia aimed at the ground in front of him and squeezed the trigger. He jumped back and raised his hands. The pistol pointed towards the ceiling. Look, there must be a misunderstanding, right? We don't need anyone getting hurt. Olivia cocked the gun again. Stay there, not another step. She pointed the gun at him with one hand and grabbed the phone off the wall with the other. She dialed. Uncle Mike, it's Olivia. Sorry to bother you at work, but I need you at the pet store on Edgar. Olivia lowered her voice. I have a gun on a guy. I need you now. The phone clattered to the ground as Olivia dropped it. Did I mention that the uncle who taught me how to shoot is the police chief? Red flashing lights streamed through the glass of the storefront window and bounced off the walls of the shop. The store door flew open and 2 officers raced in with their guns pointed at the man. Olivia dropped her gun on the counter and held up her hands. He has stolen goods in the back of the shop. One officer got out his handcuffs, pulled the man's hands behind his back, and cuffed him. Uncle Mike slid through the door and ran to Olivia. He grabbed her and held her tight. Never do anything like this ever again. Chapter 8. The lock clicked into place on Chico's travel carrier. Dread washed over Olivia, and her stomach churned. Oh, Chico, I hate leaving Mom here all alone. This really stinks. Olivia blinked back tears. Uh-oh. Chico leaned against the wire door of his travel carrier and looked at Olivia with one eye. Oh, no. Yes, it feels like an uh-oh. Chi-Chi pushed Olivia's bedroom door open and strutted in. She walked up to Chico's travel carrier and growled at him. Woof! Chico barked at Chi-Chi. All right, you two. Chi-Chi, you are about to have the entire house to yourself again. Olivia sank down on her bed. Take care of Mom for me, okay? Chi-Chi sat back on her haunches and lifted her front feet up on her front of her chest. She cocked her head and whined. Olivia reached down to pet her, then pulled her hand back. Are you going to nail me? Chi-Chi walked in a circle and then laid down on the carpet, showing her tummy. Olivia took a breath and let it out. She tentatively reached down and pet Chi-Chi's exposed tummy. Gadzooks! Chico pulled back from the door of his travel carrier. I know, right? Margaret paused in front of Olivia's door. Well, look at that. You and Chi-Chi are friends. Chi-Chi flipped onto her feet and snarled at Olivia. She ran over to Margaret and begged to be picked up. You little Dickens. Margaret lifted her up and kissed her head. I saw Olivia petting you. Chi-Chi's tongue hung out of one side of her mouth and she shivered. Is my baby cold? Margaret tucked her under her cardigan. Are you and Chico ready? Uncle Mike called. He's on his way here to pick you guys up. Olivia looked around her childhood bedroom. Her suitcase sat by Chico's carrier. Tears welled up again. Yeah, I guess we're ready. She stood up, walked over to her mom, and hugged her. Chico growled and bit in the air threateningly. Olivia darted back. You little twit! Now, Chi-Chi, be nice to your sister. Margaret pet Chi-Chi's head. The little dog looked up at Margaret and laid her head on her chest. Sister, huh? Olivia rolled her eyes. I think she'd like to be an only child. Now, don't say that. She did let you pet her tummy. The doorbell rang. Oh, that must be Mike. Do you need help with your luggage? No, Mom. I've got it. You go let Uncle Mike in. Olivia reached into the breast pocket of her coat and made sure she had her plane tickets and Chico's travel papers. She picked up her suitcase in one hand and Chico's carrier in the other and headed downstairs. Hey, Uncle Mike. Thanks for taking us to the airport. Mike took her suitcase from her. My pleasure. Glad to get a little extra time with my favorite niece. I'm your only niece. Still my favorite. Are you ready? Olivia nodded. Her throat felt too tight to talk from choking back the tears. She put Chico's cage down and hugged her mom, squishing Chi-Chi between them. If you need me, I won't go. Margaret pulled a tissue out of the sleeve of her cardigan and wiped her eyes. No, you have adventures waiting for you. You can't stay here babysitting your old mom. You're not old, Mom. Well, I'm starting to feel like I am. Mike cleared his throat. All right, ladies, let's get this show on the road. He held the door open for Olivia as she carried Chico's cage through. He opened the back seat and she slid Chico's carrier onto the seat. She tucked a scarf around the carrier. Mike shut the back door and opened the front. Olivia climbed into the passenger seat. She looked back at the house. Margaret stood behind the glass storm door, waving, as Mike pulled out of the driveway, and they headed towards the airport. Am I doing the wrong thing, leaving her here alone, Uncle Mike? Liv, you can't stay here forever. At some point, your mom is going to have to figure out how to navigate her new life. And she's not alone. I'm here. I know you are. Knowing she has you is the only reason I feel like I can go back to the ship. I'm sure Peter is missing you and wants you back on the ship with him. I guess so. Now, before we get to the airport, I want to have a little talk with you, Missy. Mike squeezed the steering wheel. You are going to all sorts of dangerous places all over the world with this job of yours, and I won't be with you if you get yourself in a jam like you did at the pet store. Olivia looked down at her hands in her lap. I don't know what you were thinking of going into the pet store and sticking your nose where it didn't belong. Mike held the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He clenched his teeth. If something had happened to you. I know. I'm sorry. It was irresponsible of me. Olivia exhaled. I promise I won't do something that risky ever again. Mike pulled off into the drop-off lane and put the car in park. You better not. Phooey, Chico chuckled from the back seat. About Wendy Neugent. Wendy Neugent spent close to a decade as part of an award-winning magic act performing on cruise ships all over the world. She traveled from Alaska to Venezuela, Bermuda to Tahiti, and many exotic ports of call in between. Now, Wendy uses her insider knowledge of cruise ship life to write fun and entertaining cozy mystery books set on cruise ships. Wendy's cruise ship mysteries are the perfect books to read while you're taking a cruise or when you wish you were on a cruise. Visit wendyneugentbooks.com for more books by Wendy, or you can join Wendy Neugent's Clue Crew on Facebook. It's a wonderful reader group with spectacular readers who love to talk about books. I hope to see you there.